I think most of the benefit of time-restricted feeding is accrued through caloric restriction. So I've always been a little unsure of how much of the time restriction was exerting its benefit through factors that go beyond what is likely a reduced calorie intake in someone with a smaller feeding window. So in other words, was there something magical about not eating? So if you had an experiment that was done where people are going to eat 3,000 calories a day spread out over the course of 12 hours versus people that are going to eat 3,000 calories spread out over 6 hours, is there any difference between them? And I think the answer today is no. I think the answer is nope. When people talk about how time-restricted feeding is helping them lose weight and manage insulin resistance and things like that, I think it appears that that's all due to reduced caloric intake. It's just harder to eat more during a narrower window. And at some point, that window gets narrow enough that it's almost impossible to eat as much as you would in the course of a day unless you're deliberately being as gluttonous as possible. And I've seen people attempt to do that for reasons I don't understand. And I think where this gets problematic is in people who can't really afford to lose too much muscle. And not completely atypical TRF scenario I see is in a patient who becomes completely obsessed with only eating in a 6-hour window or even less. And at the end of a year, they've lost 5 pounds. So they were kind of normal-ish weight to begin with. They were 180 pounds to begin with, and they're 5'11", so pretty normal. And a year later, they're 175, and they're like, "God, this is just amazing. I've lost 5 pounds. I feel like I can eat whatever I want." Then you do a DEXA scan on them, and you realize, well, you lost 10 pounds of lean tissue, and you gained 5 pounds of fat mass. So yes, you're down 5 pounds, but your body fat is actually up. I'm making this up because I'd have to do the math, but your body fat's up 3%. Your visceral fat is up by 500 grams. Nothing has moved in the right direction except this very, very crude measurement of the number on the scale. In these individuals, I think because they're eating so much less protein, they're impairing muscle protein synthesis, so they're actually losing lean mass even while putting on fat mass. They're oftentimes becoming insulin resistant. I especially see this in people who are doing one meal a day, the so-called OMAD, especially because most people who are doing that are doing it late in the day. And so now they're having impaired glucose homeostasis overnight. We're seeing high glucose levels overnight, probably high cortisol levels, and impaired glucose tolerance in the morning. So a lot of these things just aren't what we would want to see. Now, there are some people for whom that still works well. So I've also seen people who lose 100 pounds and 70 of it is fat and 30 of it is lean, and they're net better off because they were starting at a body weight of 300 pounds and they certainly had the amount of lean mass to improve. So their body fat maybe goes from 50% to 35%. I'm kind of making those numbers up. So they're moving in the right direction. The point here is, I think you need to ask yourself before you go on an aggressive TRF regimen, how much muscle mass can you afford to lose? And if the answer is none, it should be the answer for most people, by the way. Most of us don't have the freedom to lose any lean mass. Then you got to make sure you're not restricting protein and that you're thinking about when you can refuel in relation to exercise. This podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, I take conflicts of interest very seriously. For all of my disclosures and the companies I invest in or advise, please visit peterattiamd.com/about, where I keep an up-to-date and active list of such companies.